Up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen, we daren't go a-hunting, for fear of little men. We folk, good folk, trooping all together, green jacket, red cap, and white owl's feather. So begins William Allingham's poem, The Fairies, in what is probably the second most quoted opening stanza of any English lyric, the first being William Blake's The Tiger. English professors, if I'm wrong about that, correct me in the comments. Everyone else, make fun of the English professors. Welcome to PhD&D, everyone. I'm Dr. Bowers, and this is a very special episode in our Ravenloft Adventure series. Today, we're going to cover a Domain of Dread, which was omitted from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, but which has been my favorite domain for many years now. That domain is the Shadow Rift, a beguiling locale that mixes fairy tale wonderment with cosmic horror. As with all my Ravenloft videos, we'll talk about what the Shadow Rift is, discuss some cultural influences that will help us get an imaginative grip on that Domain of Dread, and sketch out an adventure. Now, our adventure is a loose recreation of the adventure Prince of Shadows from the 2nd edition D&D supplement, The Shadow Rift. It will take PCs from level 9 up through level 14. That is, the PCs will finish the adventure at level 14 and, with DM's permission, level up to 15 at the end. Our recreation of the adventure Prince of Shadows includes elements from Dungeons of the Mad Mage, Keys to the Golden Vault, Acquisitions Incorporated, and Mythic Odysseys of Theros. So, spoilers for the dungeons Willow Wood, Shadow Dusk Hold, Mad Goth's Castle, Party at Palisette Palace, and the Temple of Erebos. So here's a spoiler warning for all of those. But before we dig into that, what is the Shadow Rift? Well, in a sunless realm whose sky alternates between a starless dark and a dim green twilight, the two courts of the Shadow Fae hold council. One, the Seelie Court, is led by Queen Maeve, who is utterly indifferent to humanity. The other, the Unseelie Court, is led by Prince Lot, who despises humanity with a malicious relish. Any humans who end up in this place, therefore, are in grave danger. For not only will the Shadow Fae beguile them, trick them, and peel their very flesh, but an even greater danger, a world-threatening danger, looms from beyond a cosmic gate, the Obsidian Gate. On the other side of that gate, the eldritch abomination, Gwydion, who created the Shadow Fae, perpetually schemes for their destruction. Assaulting and twisting their dreams, Gwydion is but a hair's breadth away from bringing the whole dread realm to oblivion. The Shadow Rift is a grimdark version of the Feywild. Unlike other Ravenloft folk horror domains, which have fairies at the very periphery but humans dominating the center, the Shadow Rift is an outright fairyland, just an evil one. The only mortals who live in the Shadow Rift are mindless slaves called changelings. Meanwhile, the domain is populated with all manner of evil fae and undead. And in addition to that, the whole domain, its very existence, is constantly threatened by an eldritch abomination called Gwydion, who is trapped behind a magical gate, a cosmic gate to some other realm of chaos and shadow. Gwydion is the true Dark Lord of the Shadow Rift, tortured by being trapped behind that obsidian gate, and helpless to do anything but send maddening dreams to the Shadow Fae. As for the Shadow Fae themselves, they're divided between the Seelie Court, ruled by Queen Maeve, and they're indifferent to humanity, and the Unseelie Court, ruled by Prince Lot, who absolutely hate humanity and love torturing humans. Now, this is an amazing setting, so let's touch on some cultural influences that will help us get an imaginative grip on the Shadow Rift. First, and perhaps most importantly, is H.P. Lovecraft's 1928 story, The Call of Cthulhu. This story, and its titular antagonist, of course, has exercised considerable influence in designing lots of Ravenloft domains. But this domain, the Shadow Rift, in particular, draws from the Call of Cthulhu's imaginative themes. The Dark Lord Gwydion is Cthulhu, basically. Just as Cthulhu is an otherworldly alien horror trapped at the bottom of the sea and yet sending maddening messages to others who threaten to help him escape his prison, so is Gwydion an otherworldly eldritch abomination who is trapped behind a cosmic gate, seeking to free himself by sending maddening dreams to the Fae who can tune in to his eldritch energies. Some Dark Lords in Ravenloft domains are talkative and appear frequently and interact constantly with the PCs. Strahd von Zarovich, for instance. But Gwydion is the very opposite of these. Gwydion is more like a force, an impending apocalypse, an influence that is baleful and heralds some kind of doom. Again, like Cthulhu. In addition to The Call of Cthulhu, I also recommend Arthur Machen's short story from 1904, The White People. Most of this short story is a first-person narrative written by a child, and it reveals things about fairies that are utterly horrifying. It's a very good example of fairies being monstrous, eldritch sorts of horrors, and I also highly recommend that you read this one. Don't rely on an audiobook. If you rely on an audiobook, you're going to miss out on some of the visual design, for lack of a better term, of the text and the way that it goes on without a single paragraph break and run-on sentences, like a child's narration when they tell you about something. And speaking of fairies looking evil, I also recommend the 2008 film Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. Not just for how it depicts fairies, but also specifically how it depicts Nuada and Nuala. Visually speaking, and even in terms of their temperament, we should take inspiration from these two. Say that Prince Lot in our adventure is very much like Nuada, looks like him, acts like him, and Queen Maeve is very much like Nuala, looks like her, acts like her. I also highly recommend the 1982 film The Dark Crystal if you're going to do some adventuring in the Shadow Rift. These worlds are actually very similar in their themes. In the Dark Crystal's world of Thra, there are these two species, the Skeksis and the Mystics, who are entwined with one another by destiny, one of them representing an ultimate evil, the other representing a neutrality, not exactly good. Likewise, in the Shadow Rift, there are these two intertwined houses, the Unseelie Court and the Seelie Court, with the Unseelie Court being absolutely evil, and the Seelie Court being, well, neutral. In the Dark Crystal's world of Thra, both of these species fear or anticipate a cosmic event, a great conjunction in which something happens that's apocalyptic. The lining up of three suns, and the adding of power to the Dark Crystal. And likewise, in the Shadow Rift, both the Seelie and the Unseelie Court either fear or look forward to the awakening and the arrival of Gwydion, whose events are similarly apocalyptic. Plus, I just imagine that the Fae and the fairies of the Shadow Rift are similar to the designs in the world of Thra that Brian Froud and others created. It's a really solid aesthetic basis for thinking about the Shadow Rift. I also, of course, recommend the 2nd edition D&D Ravenloft supplement, The Shadow Rift, since it's chock full of all of the information about this place, and also contains, again, the Prince of Darkness, an adventure that we're about to adapt using 5th edition materials. I also recommend the 2004 Ravenloft Gazetter Volume 5, which has a very informative section on the Shadow Rift, which can help you in thinking about its themes and what other adventures you can do there, as well as the 2013 adventure by Kobold Press, Court of the Shadow Fae. There's a lot of fun mechanics and adventures, especially in the middle couple chapters, if your PCs choose to stay in the Shadow Rift and start socializing with the Seelie Court. Alright, with cultural inspirations out of the way, let's outline our adventure. In Act 1, the PCs find themselves in the Shadow Rift, swept there by the mists of Ravenloft. They brave unseelie dangers and eventually meet Queen Maeve, who asks them to perform an important mission. The map that we'll use for Act 1 is Willow Wood from Dungeon of the Mad Mage. In Act 2, the PCs attempt that mission, steal the Crown of Arak from Prince Lot, who, now wearing it, has been acting a little strangely. For this chapter, we're going to use the penultimate adventure in Keys to the Golden Vault, Party at Palace. We're going to make some changes, of course. One of them is that Prince Lot will escape with the crown, and it's going to be up to the PCs to track him down and stop him from destroying the world by unleashing Gwydion. In Act 3, the PCs journey to Arak's tomb in order to find the legendary Sword of Arak, a weapon that can be used to defeat Lot. And the map we'll use for this is on page 127 of Mythic Odysseys of Theros, the Graveyard Temple. We're going to fill it with all kinds of Sorrowsworn and do some cool role-playing about who Arak was. And once the PCs find the Sword of Arak, they move on to the Darken Heights. In Act 4, in the Darken Heights, the PCs must avoid undead perils and negotiate between a fairy dragon and a homunculus of the Mad Fae Queen mob. And the adventure we're going to use for this act is Madgoth's Castle, which is level 7 of Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Then, in Act 5, as PCs make their way towards the Obsidian Gate to stop Lot from performing a ritual there that would unleash Gwydion, they must travel through an ancient Fae palace. This palace holds some of Arak's original siblings, Oberon, Titania, and other Archfae. And for this map, we're going to use Shadow Dusk Hold, which is level 22 of Dungeon of the Mad Mage. We're going to tone some things down. And finally, in Act 6, the PCs will confront Prince Lot just as he's attempting to complete a ritual to summon Gwydion from the Obsidian Gate and thereby destroy the world, and they have to engage in a last-ditch battle at the edge of oblivion. It's going to be a great adventure that mixes folk horror with cosmic horror, so let's get started. In Act 1, the PCs are deposited in the Shadow Rift by a cloud of Shadowfell mist that whisks them there. They're at level 9, and we're going to jump right to the map of Willow Wood, which is level 5 of Dungeon of the Mad Mage. When they arrive, describe how the sky is a sickly green twilight with a faint emerald sun in the distance, and the gnarled, twisted branches of the surrounding black trees reaching out like grasping hands. We're going to change Willow Wood in a few ways. We're going to replace the Archdruid Willow with Queen Maeve of the Seelie Court. She's waiting for the PCs in the same place in her tower, but in this case she knows that they're here, and she's using the dangers of the wood to see whether they're good enough to assign a quest to. It's a test. Second, we're going to replace Veldemar, the green dragon with an identity crisis, with an evil treant that is out to get the PCs. Its name is Blackroot. It has the statistics of a young black dragon, except its creature type is plant, it does not have a fly speed, its breath weapon is just a matter of spewing acidic sap, and all its other attacks are accomplished by the waving of so many magical tree limb arms. Blackroot is aggressive, he despises mortals, and will say as much and attack the PCs on sight. Now, once the PCs find Queen Maeve of the Seelie Court in her tower, she will congratulate them for passing a test, introduce herself, offer the PCs healing and food and rest, and explain where they are. They are in the Shadow Rift, realm of the Shadow Fae. It is a realm for fairies, not mortals, but now that they are here, they can help her, Queen Maeve, with a very important task. Maeve needs help with her brother, Prince Lot of the Unseelie Court. Lot has recently discovered and donned an ancient cultural artifact, the Crown of Erak. It is a powerful relic of her people's history, Maeve says. Ever since he put it on, however, Lot has been acting strangely, and Maeve is worried. She worries that Lot is enchanted, cursed, or brainwashed, and she asks the PCs to steal the crown from him during a party that's going to occur soon at the Malachite Palace. Now, if the PCs ask why Queen Maeve needs them, she will explain that there is an ancient magical law, the Law of Erak, which says that no Shadow Fae can harm or directly thwart another Shadow Fae. It would be impossible, therefore, for her to steal the crown from her brother, and also for her to order another Fae to do the same. Only a mortal could steal the crown, and they are worthy mortals. As an incentive, Maeve offers to disguise the PCs as Shadow Fae themselves, and she also promises that if the PCs succeed in their task, she will help them get home. Now, she's very specific about this. This is not actually a real promise. She promises that she will help the PCs get home, but in her opinion, the PCs are already home in the Shadow Rift because they can't leave. Her promise is literally true, but twisted in the standard Fae way. Now, after all this, assuming the PCs accept Maeve's quest, they level up to 10, and we proceed to Act 2 of our adventure. Now for Act 2, we're going to jump right into the penultimate adventure from Keys to the Golden Vault, the party at Palisette Palace. We're just going to make a couple of changes. First, we're going to change the frolicsome Palisette Palace to the eerie Malachite Palace. Describe everything as being made of that swirling green stone malachite, and add a gruesome gothic flair to any NPCs. We're also, of course, changing Lady Zorhana Adulare to Prince Lot of the Unseelie Court, and we're changing the Shard Solitar to the Crown of Erak. The plot, however, remains the same. We've changed Elephas to Queen Maeve of the Seelie Court, of course, since she's the one who gives the PCs the mission, and importantly, we are changing the Far Realm entity to Gwydion, Dark Lord of the Shadow Rift. I would also find a way to make sure that the PCs enter the dimensional gateway in area P18. You could even move the gateway around to facilitate this. When they enter the gateway, they find that Prince Lot is actually worshipping Gwydion, not resisting Gwydion. They can still escape by defeating invisible stalkers, however, and bring the real Lot with them. Finally, at the adventure's conclusion, make sure that the Crestfallen Coven arrives and facilitates Lot's escape with the crown. Even if the PCs already cracked the crown and completed that part of the adventure, Lot must escape with the crown. Make sure the Crestfallen Coven help him do that. Now, once Lot escapes, the entire palace is going to be in an uproar, and Maeve is going to find the PCs and escort them into a private room in order to counsel with them. At that point, they level up to 11, and we proceed to Act 3 of our adventure. Act 3 begins with Maeve explaining what she fears to the PCs. Lot has been somehow enthralled by the eldritch sorcerer fiend Gwydion, a being that lies dreaming beyond a cosmic gate to a pure realm of chaos and shadow, another dimension. This gate, the Obsidian Gate, is the only thing holding Gwydion back from emerging into the Shadow Rift and utterly destroying it along with anyone inside. Indeed, Maeve says, whenever the Shadow Fae sleep, and they do sleep, they dream of Gwydion in the darkness, miles high, a colossal force that cannot be withstood. Now Prince Lot is enthralled, about to make those nightmares a reality. The PCs must stop Prince Lot before he reaches the Obsidian Gate and destroys the world. Maeve once again mentions the ancient law of Arak, which says that no Shadow Fae can oppose or thwart any other Shadow Fae directly, and implores the PCs as mortals to intervene. She again repeats that she will use all her magic to help them find home, and she adds that she will do everything possible to appoint them as Royal Archfey of the Seelie Court if they succeed. The wording is important. She says she will do everything possible, but in her opinion of what mortals are and what the Shadow Fae are, there is no possible way they could become Archfey. So her promise is kind of true. She will do everything that's possible, namely all 0 of those things. And of course, if the PCs do not embark on this quest, they will be destroyed along with the rest of the Shadow Rift. Assuming the PCs accept, then, Queen Maeve tells them to follow a river, the Falling River, to Arak's tomb. There they must search the buildings of Arak's tomb and find the legendary Sword of Arak. Without it, it will be impossible to stop Lot. Once they find the Sword of Arak, the PCs must continue following the river to the craggy area known as the Darken Heights, full of horrors. There, amid the Darken Heights, they can find the entrance to where the Obsidian Gate is located. They must go there with the Sword of Arak and stop Prince Lot. The last thing that Queen Maeve gives the PCs is a ring of keys, with which they can open the otherwise locked doors in Arak's tomb. So that's where they head next, Arak's tomb. You could have them fast travel, or you could have some encounters with evil fae or undead along the way. Either way is fine. Once they reach Arak's tomb, we're going to use the map of the Graveyard Temple from page 127 of Mythic Odysseys of Theros, from chapter 4 in the section on Erebos. We're going to place the Sword of Arak in one of the various buildings on this map, and we're going to make sure that it's not the first or second one that the PCs search. We're also, however, going to make sure that every building has a Sorrowsworn or some Sorrowsworn in it. And with these Sorrowsworn, you want to lean into the roleplay. Have every Sorrowsworn be obsessed with Arak and his loss and the predicament that they're now in. The Sorrowsworn, known as the Angry, are enraged that Arak is gone. The Sorrowsworn, known as the Lonely, are sad and lonely that Arak is gone, and so on. You can then use the Sorrowsworn, either during battles or before battles, to dispense some information about the Shadow Rift, about Gwydion, about Arak, and about the origins of the Shadow Fae. As for outside the buildings, just wandering about, I would throw in some vampire spawn or a Nosferatu. Those are appropriate monsters for just wandering around Arak's tomb, I think. Now, once the PCs actually find the Sword of Arak, I would be permissive with what exactly it is. Maybe it's the Sun Sword from Curse of Strahd. Maybe it's your favorite enchanted sword. Don't give them something that's too strong or too weak, but choose an enchanted sword and let that be the Sword of Arak. Maybe whoever attunes to it gets the Fey-Touched feat. Whatever you think would be cool. At that point, the PCs level up to 12, and they make their way from Arak's tomb along the banks of the falling river to the Darken Heights, and Act 4 of the adventure. In Act 4, the PCs are traveling through the Darken Heights, a craggy, rocky, dark, maze-like structure that's full of all kinds of horrors. And to represent the Darken Heights, we're going to use Madgoth's Castle, which is level 7 of Dungeon of the Mad Mage. And we're going to make a few changes. First, we're going to change the stone giants to undead devourers. These are scarier, more appropriate to the setting, and more formidable opponents, but they behave towards the PCs exactly as the stone giants are scripted to behave, violently. We're also going to change the identity of the wizardly homunculus inside the titular castle. The homunculus is no longer a homunculus of some random wizard Madgoth. No, instead, it's a homunculus of the Archfey, Mad Queen Mob. She has information about Prince Lot and about the location of the Obsidian Gate, but she'll only dispense it to the PCs if they help her get rid of a fairy dragon that has moved into her shrinking castle. The fairy dragon, Otto, will remain unchanged. We love Otto. And like the homunculus, Otto will also offer the PCs directions to the Obsidian Gate if only they can take care of and get rid of the homunculus of Queen Mob. It's basically just Madgoth's Castle with a couple monster swap-outs and an identity change for the homunculus. But it runs the same, and when the PCs complete it, they get directions to the Obsidian Gate, and they level up to 13, and we move on to Act 5, the penultimate act of our Shadow Rift adventure. Act 5 begins with the PCs arriving at the site of the entrance to the Obsidian Gate. Because of the powerful enchantments involved, the PC have no choice but to descend into the depths of an Archfey palace, one which has become warped and twisted with the eldritch energies that emanate from the Obsidian Gate. And for this palace, we're going to use Shadow Dusk Hold, which is level 22 from Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Now, Shadow Dusk Hold is intended for PCs of level 17, and our PCs are level 13, so we're going to have to make a few changes. First, take each group of monsters and divide their number in half, rounding up. So if in one room a group of 6 Grell would normally attack the PCs, make it 3 Grell. Or if a group of 7 Nothics were about to attack the PCs, make it 4 Nothics. I would keep all the named NPCs, Melisara, Darion, Berlain, Vertrand, Zalthar, and Desmir, but describe them as some of the original Archfey related to Arak, who stayed behind to make sure that the Obsidian Gate stayed closed. But in staying behind, they were corrupted by the weird eldritch magic that emanated from that gate, so that now they're monsters. They rave about Gwydion and the inevitable coming of the end of the world, and I would say that with at least half of them, give the PCs a chance to avoid conflict. These are archmages. Also, take away Desmir's sword. It is way overpowered. Just replace Desmir with an ordinary Death Knight. And finally, get rid of the Dracolich. We don't need a Dracolich, it's unnecessary. Instead, replace the Dracolich with an enchanted staircase that plunges upward to the actual location of the Obsidian Gate. When the PCs reach that area of the dungeon, they will have to have traversed most of the rest of the dungeon, and so it's an appropriate place to put the staircase to the final boss. And speaking of which, once the PCs reach that staircase, they ascend to level 14 and up the stairs to Act 6, the final act of this adventure. Now, Act 6 is our final act, and the PCs are level 14, and to run it, we're going to use a map that's very similar from the section called The End of the World from Acquisitions Incorporated. Here's the map, and here's what we're going to do to it. First, Lot stands atop a ceremonial ground in front of the Obsidian Gate. The top of the mound is 40 feet above the base, and there's a flight of stairs, 8 stairs, on either side of the mound. Each one of these stairs, however, has a magic rune that can only be noticed with a DC 13 Wisdom or Intelligence check, and, once noticed, can only be avoided with a DC 13 Strength or Dexterity check. If a PC crosses one of those steps without successfully making those checks, they take 5 points of necrotic damage and are immediately teleported to the base of the pedestal. Now, Lot himself has the statistics of a Starspawn Larva Mage, with legendary resistance and also the Mythic trait. When Lot is reduced to 0 hit points, he transforms into something that resembles and has the same statistics as a Yuan-Ti Anathema, except for, instead of its heads being snake heads, they're like the heads of maggots or worms or lampreys. Now, when the battle starts, there are already 2d4 starspawn grues at the base of the mound, and at the end of each round, on initiative count 0, 2d4 more starspawn grues come out of the gate to attack the PCs. And the grues don't have to worry about the booby-trapped stairs. Gwydion protects them, or something. Also, at the start of each round, on initiative count 20, an enormous tentacle or cloven hoof protrudes from the obsidian gate and slams against the ground. Gwydion, or a small appendage of him. When this happens, the spell Thunderwave is cast on each PC, who must make a DC 22 Constitution save to avoid taking force damage and being pushed back 10 feet away from the obsidian gate. Finally, the battle is over when the PCs have defeated Lot in his mythic form and thrown the crown of Arak into the obsidian gate. At that point, the entire area is rocked with an earthquake. There are flashes of magic. Everything crumbles and then goes black. When the PCs awaken, bloodied and beaten amongst ruins, Queen Maeve arrives and thanks them for saving the world. She admonishes them, however, for killing her brother. And as for the promises she made, well, she said that she would help them get home, and here they are. The Shadow Rift is their home. They cannot leave. And as for becoming Archfey, well, she said she'd do everything possible to help them achieve that end, but there are no possible things. They can never become Archfey. The PCs, she says, should be grateful that they can escape with their lives. Now be gone. And at this point, the adventure is over. The PCs have indeed saved the world, but can expect no gratitude from the Shadowfey. Instead, as they level up to 15, a fell cloud of shadowy mist surrounds them and either whisks them off to their next Ravenloft adventure, or somewhere else, or, at worst, somewhere else in the Shadow Rift. And that's our adventure in the Shadow Rift. A recasting of the old 2nd edition adventure Prince of Darkness, but with pieces appropriated from 5e releases. What do you think? Do you think fairies work well with Call of Cthulhu in the way that we attempted to work here? Let me know in the comments. Thanks very much for watching, stay tuned for more videos in the future, and I'll be in touch soon.